Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How Knowledge Management Plays a Leading Role in a Digital Strategy, featuring both Verint and our customer Equiniti. Before we start, just a few housekeeping items. Remember that today's webinar is streamed through your computer speakers. Those of you that cannot hear me now cannot hear this message, but everyone please take a few minutes to check the audio controls of your computer. The webinar is scheduled to run for the next hour and is being streamed live. It's also being recorded, so after the webinar is complete, there will be links made available that point to a copy of the presentation. Those should be automatically emailed out within the next 24 hours. There will be the opportunity to ask questions of the presenters at the end of the presentation, but by all means feel free to submit your questions during the presentations, and we'll go through those at the end of the presentation. Don't worry if we are not able to get to all of the questions. We will have copies of them, and the panelists are able to get back in touch with you directly in order to answer any questions or to continue and facilitate the conversation. So I'm excited to introduce today's presenters, and in addition to myself, Heather Richards, I have with me Stephen Green, Head of Digital Strategy and Group Chief Customer Office, and Darren Charles, Head of Customer Experience, both from Equiniti, an international technology-led services and payment specialist. They're going to talk about how their own digital transformation journey and their digital strategy and how knowledge management actually played a major role in facilitating the changes through this process. One of the things that I love about both Stephen and Darren is their passion for customer experience. During the time that I've worked with them, it's been obvious that the decisions they're making to drive forward Equiniti's digital strategy have always had the customer at the center of this process. So before we go ahead, what I want to start off with is a poll. It'd be interesting to know, just looking at the audience, where you are within your knowledge management journey. That sort of allows us to understand who we're speaking to, who's interested in the subject of knowledge management, but also frame some of the discussions that we're having going forward around that. So if everyone can take a moment to actually select their answer here, and we'll look at the results in a few moments. Okay, I'm going to take a look at the results here. That's interesting. Okay, so the results here are showing actually a lot of you already have knowledge management but are looking for improved functionality, which is interesting. And I think we'll look as we're going forward. Knowledge management has been a discipline, shall we say, that's been around for a long time, but there have been some major advancements in recent years over the tools you have to actually facilitate knowledge management within an organization. So hopefully we'll hear a lot about that from Stephen and Darren, and then I'll have a few comments as we go toward the end. So Equiniti is a great example of a visionary organization that's actually putting customers and employee engagement front and center. And as you listen to Stephen and Darren's journey, it does become clear that it's through their digital transformation initiatives that they've looked to use customer engagement technologies like KM to address evolving workplace changes and also business dynamics. And one of the exciting things about knowledge management in this context is that really by its nature, if done well, leads to the collaborative approach necessary to make digital transformation a success. It helps break down silos. So over the last few years, what we've seen is more and more technologies that were originally developed to support customers are now actually being used within a business itself. And knowledge management is a perfect example of this. And it's the recognition of putting the emphasis on reducing the effort in day-to-day interactions that your customers and employees have with your organization actually leads to better business outcomes. And that can actually be quite transformational. So Equiniti is a great example of this simplify, modernize, and automation message that Verint is so passionate about. We're looking to deliver solutions that help organizations simplify, modernize, and automate all aspects of customer engagement across the enterprise, with a specific focus on then helping elevate this experience while improving operational efficiency. And I think that Stephen and Darren have some great examples of how this is actually done in practice, utilizing knowledge management to facilitate this, and then talking as well about some of the outcomes that they've seen. So at this point, what I'm going to do is pass over to Stephen and Darren to hear more about their digital transformation journey.
Great. Many thanks, Heather, and yeah, welcome to everyone, and really pleased you can join us today. As Heather mentioned, it's an absolute passion of myself and Darren, both in terms of digitization, but also right at its heart, the customer. So a little introduction to us and Equiniti. Equiniti started life as a UK firm, but it's now a global company, having acquired Wells Fargo's share registration or transfer agents in the US, and also having our colleagues over in India in our tech hub, but also digital businesses across Europe as well. So the breadth that we have is global. We also touch 36 million customers or thereabouts around the world. And for us, when we look at digital strategy, for me, that's about delivering on the business strategy. And for Equiniti, that is very much rooted in that customer and the customer experience. We're a technology firm that works with major clients. For us, looking after their employees or their audiences as if their own customer is central to what we do. So hopefully that resonates, and we also work across financial services, pensions, investments, and in the payments industry as well. So a real breadth of service. And what we would like to share with you today is a case study with one of our businesses, which is Self-Trade. And it's a regulated stockbroking firm in the UK, based in the UK, but really from what we prefer to think of it as is as a specialist retailer, one that is now multi-channel as well, with a customer base. And we started with Self-Trade because it was actually quite a complex business, as I mentioned, not only regulated, but also serving a breadth of customers. And that's where we started looking at knowledge automation, the benefits it could give from a customer perspective, but also how we deliver that service. We started there with, we acquired it in 2015. Our work with the knowledge automation started life in 2017. And what we saw in this business is that we had a new breed of investor. And I'm sure this is familiar to many of you listening to this webinar today, which is we saw people wanting to be digitally enabled. They were wanting 24-hour support or information. And again, it's that expectation that's been driven through their experience of retail brands, other fintech and other banking experiences. And we really looked at that and thought, how can we use technology to go further and make that experience richer, more convenient, and also one that could adapt to people who were looking for self-service. We had a business that was very strong in terms of its telephony and its expertise when you got in touch with us. We wanted to offer that level of service throughout the week and beyond. So that's something we can talk a little bit further about as we go through this case study. So with that in mind, we really had a chance to look at this business as part of a wider transformation that we had in Equiniti. And we had the opportunity to look at the platform that we delivered this business through, and in that look at how do we integrate other technology to enrich and make that experience more seamless. So that's where we started working with the Verint knowledge automation system as a way to bring a new service to our customers in line with this relaunch. We had FAQs in the past. We maybe had quite a few, in fact, maybe up to 100 or so, but we realized that the breadth of the service and also the level of the experience that we wanted to cater for, we wanted to go further than that. So there was a start, and that's where we really started to embark on the journey. At this point, I'd like to hand over to my colleague, Darren, who will explain where we had a compelling reason to change on our internal teams and service teams.
Excellent. Thank you, Stephen. Hello, everyone. So what Stephen said, we had obviously some key reasons to change from an online point of view, but there was absolutely some some great reasons that we needed to put a solution like this in place for our front-facing customer teams. We needed to improve their experience. There's a massive link between employee experience and customer experience, and we needed to provide them with information they needed when they needed it in a format that was easy to understand and quick to access. Because we knew we needed to put these type of things in place, this knowledge in place, so we could move forward to providing a more always-on 24/7 service for our customers. So let me talk to you a little bit about our approach. So we did it in 2 phases. And the first phase was adding the solution to our customer online portal, our website. And we needed to do it, as Stephen said, as part of our relaunch and our replatforming. But we knew from working with Verint that we could also use that customer base as almost like a crowd-sourcing solution and getting our customers to help us with the knowledge that they needed and when they needed it. So we initially seeded the online solution with approximately 100 articles, knowledge articles. And, you know, some of the similar ones that we probably had previously around our frequently asked questions. But we had a team then at the ready to respond to those customer feedbacks, really looking at using the analytics that the Verint solution offered to say, what are customers searching for? What's their intent? And can we write new articles quickly to meet those needs? And phase 2 was about then moving that technology into the front line. So the customers and our frontline customer experience representatives have access to that same rich knowledge. So Stephen, if I hand over to you about the objectives.
This is a really important point from where we began, and it's very interesting that we had expectations around this service experience. Well, when we started actually putting the investment in to use this new solution, we wanted to actually adopt a test and learn approach. We didn't know how it would actually work for our customers, whether we would be able to give that experience that we had with our teams, with our experts through our traditional channels in this web format as the first phase. So we went with eyes open, really optimistic about what we might see, and we built the solution to scale should it be successful. And I think that's an important point, which is we went in with a test and learn approach, but we built it in a way that we could scale it as rapidly as the sort of demand for it scaled as well. So the key part was we wanted to make sure that customers found the right content, and again, that was very easy from day one, really, because with the replatforming, we also had a lot of interest and traffic to the website, and naturally we found people adopt the online solution as easy as they would search for any content online, and it was something we saw straight away on the launch of the new platform, that customers were asking a really broad range of questions that we were able to see in real time alongside the contact that we were getting through our telephony and through our email and other channels alongside that as well. So that was the part where we were really measuring and looking at the objectives from day one. But then we wanted to make sure that it was a solution that would be easy to manage, that we wanted our expert teams to be able to use the software, and that was the case. I think there's always with new software a degree of trepidation about how much learning would be required, but it was very simple. And in fact, the question and answer format and the ease of editing in the back end of the solution was one that suddenly got a number of teams being able to work together on providing richer answers, and also being able to use the solution themselves. So what we saw was what the customer was seeing, and I think that was another part of how we could get rolling. The other part was around looking at the NPS and customer satisfaction. Now, we measure these across our services, but for this we wanted to ensure that we gave the solution time to scale. But what we saw was very encouraging. In terms of the business we saw NPS up 8 points to 55, and we also saw CSAT improve to 98%. Now, that was part of our wider change that we looked at how we holistically improve the service. But the Verint knowledge automation was absolutely core to that from the outset, and particularly on those digital channels. So we were really pleased that we were seeing those positive moves in both NPS and CSAT from this change. But we also really wanted to say about using the solution and be able to allow it to grow as we learn with it. So that was a key point on that. As I mentioned, some of those early signs of success. The project was delivered on time, on budget, in line with what was a major replatforming of the solution. And I think that's one that allows people to, I think, begin with this approach as we had, which was the online first, is that it could be delivered in line with what was complex digital delivery. The other side to that is that we saw the articles very easy to scale and grow. As Darren mentions, we started with the core set that we had and with the product team who oversee our service. Now, that allowed us to see and respond to the questions that people were asking in real time. And I think that's the big difference for me around a knowledge automation approach, which is absolutely key, is that ability to respond to the most pertinent, seasonal, topical questions. And also, for me, is see the language that the customers were using and be able to reflect that in the answers that we were giving, and also enable to make a simpler service. And that's something that was really easy to capture in the analytics that came from the solution. And also, we saw huge engagement, and I think that comes to the fact that the solution is very similar to maybe some of the other ways we search and find information online. We saw, as we say, 38,000 article views within the first 3 months. That was more than enough information to be able to target really important pieces of knowledge for those customers. And as I mentioned, this all helped us move our key metrics in the right direction. And the final part to say on that is that we were able to see people using the solution 24/7 in the hours where our service lines or other lines may have been closed outside of market hours. We were able to capture that insight, and that was something that in the early stages really gave us a head start and was key to then the next stage of the solution.
Yeah, and we saw a lot of success as well when we put this into the second phase at our frontline for our frontline representatives. We saw that representatives were engaging with the solution. We saw 95% of our reps engaging with the solution in the first 6 months. We used that analytic capability that we've talked about quite a lot to ensure that we reacted when those frontline representatives were giving us feedback on the articles, what they liked, what they didn't like, what was missing. And to Stephen's point as well, reflecting the language they were using, cutting out jargon in all of the knowledge articles and actually using language that made it really simple to understand. We were able to, with the solution, publish knowledge in advance, ready for when that particular task or event or piece of knowledge became available. And ultimately, this built a level of trust with our users that the knowledge system that was in place was here to stay, and it was where we needed to get all of the sort of the latest and greatest information to service and provide a great customer experience. But it wasn't easy to get people to adopt a new solution. There's lots of new pieces of technology that Equiniti implement, and they don't always sort of land. And we wanted to make sure this did land. So adoption and scaling of the solution to our front line was really key. We knew we had great technology at our fingertips, but how did we get people to use it? Well, the first thing that we did is we gave it a name, and we got all of our team that were going to be using it into a competition to name the system, and they voted to call it Edison, after Thomas Edison. And what we then did was get our internal creative team to work up a brand for Edison, imagery, and that made it look and feel quite special, and actually something that that they'd created and it was theirs, rather than an off-the-shelf tool. And we got more adoption by putting exclusive pieces of knowledge into it initially. We were still running some of our old knowledge solutions, so we started getting people to come and have a look into our knowledge solution by putting exclusive content in there, exclusive processes, and that drove traffic into the tool. And while they're in that tool, they saw some other articles that we'd done or other information and things they didn't know, and that's how we got that adoption. And we added a team. The key thing straight away was having a team of people there waiting to be writing this information initially, but then responding to that, and that was key. We also added elements of fun, so our knowledge team would often put Easter eggs of information into our knowledge articles, and when people found them, they would get prizes, wine, beer, chocolates, those sort of things. So it made people want to engage and have a look at these articles that have been written. And the team that we have, that expanded really quickly as well in the demand for how much it was being used. We saw our team grow from 3 to 5 quite quickly, and that team is now expanding from 3 to 7 people because we are finding more and more knowledge around the business, and more things that we want to be empowering our front line to be able to help our customers with. So, Stephen, looking forward.
And this is a great stage for us to be at, really, which is we started with the belief that this technology could help the customer experience, and we went with I think a healthy dose of reality that we were needing to adopt a new piece of technology as part of a new platform. There's a lot of other changes, but the success, as we say, both the customer response to it, the ease of seeing those insights, the connection we felt to the customers through seeing their search queries, seeing the language that they used when they were needing to ask those questions, then led to the internal rollout. And this is gathering momentum, and I think it's also key to ensure that as the technology is rolled out, there's also that capability in the teams. We're looking now across a range of services. We have, this example shows one service around our retail investment offering, but then we're looking to say, how do we deliver that level of service through to our employee plans, where we administer share plans on behalf of our clients and major corporates? How can we give employees who are using our services the same level of ease and information at their fingertips? And also with that is how we build internal awareness of this. And I think it's both the success we've seen from the online solution that people can use, but also the internal teams, and quite quickly seeing that teams who are joining are able to understand the idea of knowledge automation, and the result, the quality of the knowledge we're able to build, as we say, through the ease of use of the system, but also those feedback loops. That's been absolutely key, ensuring that when we ask the system a question, the result we get back is excellent. And from there, we can suddenly see it's been very easy in that sense to warm up other stakeholders and other people internally and colleagues who are looking to develop their services that they offer. So, looking to broaden the range of services, we're also looking to see how we can optimize each part of the content, and I think it's that kind of cultural passion to say, how do we make this content as good as it can be? In the UK, I'm a particular proponent of a practice called content design, which is essentially user experience for words. And when we look at that, then we mean each interaction, each piece of content is simple, it's structured, and we make it available to as many people as possible. So we can make that as simple and easy for them to use. So we're also looking at those areas, again, using the analytics to really pick the biggest opportunities there. And also start benchmarking for success. So I think as I mentioned, we've gone with that experimentation and test and learn. Really now we say we want to set high standards for ourselves. Darren mentions the team is building not only in size and numbers, but also in capability. And we really want to say, how far can we take this? And as we look at the next points, really, now we have the system in place, it opens new opportunities. And I think that's those foundations that we've put in that may interest a number of people here listening today, which is how do we take it to that next step? And I think it's important to say, always be ambitious. We know that, whilst customers are using our website today, they may be using another interface tomorrow. And it's that future-proofing and that sort of mindset that we're looking to embed in the teams around knowledge automation. And I think, in terms of the work we're doing, and I know Darren has a roadmap and a plan that this can then integrate into. And I think, Darren, if you wanted to sort of expand perhaps on those pieces.
Absolutely, yeah. The system as well, we are seeing more and more how it's changing our internal operating rhythm with how we are training people in the front line. We are telling them less and less what things are and explaining these things and telling them more and more how to find these things, which is, it's totally enabled by the technology that we've got. But building that great knowledge is key to our future aspirations. We want to expose our knowledge that we're currently creating more and more to our customers. So integration into our sort of future omni-channel technologies is going to allow us to have that always on, always available state of customer service that we're looking for, that brings our services more into a 24/7 availability that people can now get online, but we can now integrate and are planning to integrate the knowledge management and all the great work that the team have done into things like our web chats and chatbots and emails and things like that to service customers how they want to be serviced. So, Stephen, I think that's probably all for us, isn't it?
Yes, is indeed. And yeah, thank you very much for listening. I see a few questions have come through as well. So if anyone's has questions for Darren or myself, please, now's the chance to write those and look forward to answering those.
Great. Thanks, Stephen and Darren. That was really insightful, actually. And it's interesting to hear about how changes, I guess, in both the expectations of your customers and employees were actually addressed with the implementation of a knowledge automation system. So if you can see knowledge management really is more than a discipline. And I really liked how you were explaining actually how you were started to use it as a way to crowdsource ideas and content from your employees and customers, which is just brilliant. Because that means you're actually addressing the issues that they have with the tool itself, creating that life cycle of knowledge. And I think that this approach actually allows you to look at ways to automate those conversations and that dialogue while at the same time improving customer experience. And you have that dual win with knowledge management, where you're actually able to look at those gains in operational efficiencies, but actually improving the experience all the way around, which is a really great thing to see. I think it's interesting just how the conversation around knowledge management has changed over the last few years. And if you look at what some of the analysts are talking about, it really reflects what we've just heard from both of you, in that, AI, the knowledge automation, is actually pushing the knowledge management agenda now. And that companies like Equiniti are actually getting on board with looking at this idea of this single repository of enterprise knowledge, now not having multiple technologies or platforms, but having that single source of truth that can be utilized and then serviced appropriately depending on the audience within a corporation. And then you have Forrester talking about how knowledge management solutions, which have been available for decades, are actually seeing a second life now. I think because we're looking at these additional use cases and the ways that knowledge automation has actually evolved using things like AI, which maps directly onto what you guys were talking about. So when we look at all of the challenges, organizational challenges that actually drive a lot of digital transformation programs, and some of the challenges that Stephen and Darren talked about are really things that we see across a lot of our customer base. And I think it's easy to get stuck on the challenges without realizing that many of them can actually be addressed through the same set of tools, so the same technologies. And to me, what makes knowledge management or knowledge automation so powerful is the number of use cases that it can actually be applied to. And we heard a few of those from Stephen and Darren, and also in terms of what they're planning for the future within Equiniti, which is quite exciting. But whether you're looking to address compliance issues or gain better insight into your customer employee experiences, tearing down historic silos of information, or even looking to invest in technology that can adapt and be implemented on into the future. Knowledge management can actually really positively address a lot of these issues. So when we're looking at delivering success through knowledge automation, a lot of it is actually looking at the things that can be delivered beyond the technology that allows you to very effortlessly find an answer to a question. And a lot of the key things that Darren and Stephen touched on, for example, collaborating, working strategically and consultatively, making sure that the technologies that you're implementing are actually future-proofed in that they will work for whatever use case you have now, but are also reusable for additional use cases, and it may be additional strategic aims of your organization going forward. Really focusing on those business outcomes that you have at the beginning, and then making sure that you're able to provide that content with consistent and accurate knowledge with the minimal effort to find what you're looking for. Really wrapped around then with the best practices, which make the creation, sharing, and consumption of knowledge simple. And using best practice consultancy and these technologies to actually deliver a superior user experience. And all those are things that Verint is focusing on. So when we're looking at this new era of knowledge management and the differences now that are changing in the market, I'm going back to the Forrester quote that we were looking at. It's really important, I think, to put into context how far the potential for knowledge management has really come. I mean, for quite a while, it was recognized as simply a tool that could do just that, manage knowledge. And some of the very first use cases never went beyond the whole dynamic FAQ sort of scenario. So some of the first use cases in customer service were actually linked to a knowledge repository with some sort of search mechanism and a way to retrieve it. But what you saw was then the combination being used to actually facilitate customer support as well. And as Stephen and Darren were discussing, this idea then can actually be seamlessly migrated into other customer channels, customer service operations, essentially giving agents or employees access to the same technologies that customers were using online. And while these use cases continue to grow, I think the real game changer in knowledge automation has been the introduction of AI tools that can work out of the box, deliver an ROI from day one. And so these capabilities paired with flexible APIs that allow you to deliver, unique and bespoke user experiences, integrate into other technologies, actually mean that it's now possible to deliver enterprise quality knowledge management in a very agile way. And I think that that's what's really changing the drive with how knowledge automation, knowledge management is being used within digital transformation strategies as well. That the technology itself is actually adopting now to align with other ways of program delivery across an organization. So when you look at this and the knowledge value cycle, and I really like the way that Stephen and Darren were describing this themselves, it is essentially what you get is a virtuous circle for knowledge. You can actually not worry about starting with every single piece of content within your entire organization. Start with what you have and build upon it. And as long as you are using a technology, a knowledge technology that has this life cycle and its capabilities built into it, it does start growing organically. So you have the consumption of knowledge, which then positively impacts customer strategy and operations. That in turn will amplify the existing knowledge capital within the infrastructure, and then that in turn plays into the knowledge curation process, or the crowdsourcing process, as they were describing it. And this then amplifies employee engagement because they feel like the input that they're putting in actually matters. And you can see then that knowledge capital growing organically based on the information that people actually want and need to consume. And so it's important to see really any sort of knowledge project as something that does grow organically over time. It's not just a search mechanism that sits on top of a bunch of static content. And it's really clear that Equiniti has seen the advantages of this particular approach. So I'm going to move on now to another poll, actually. And we're interested in knowing what your primary reason and interest in knowledge management is to help customers serve themselves, reduce handle times in the contact center, reduce training time for new agents, or to improve overall customer satisfaction. It'll be interesting to see what the audience out there is thinking of in terms of the ways that they're planning on using knowledge management going into the future. Okay, I'm going to give it a couple more seconds. Oh, some votes are still coming in. Okay, so the way that the poll has ended at this point in time, let's take a look. Within is to improve overall customer satisfaction has been the winner there. And I think that does play on the reoccurring theme that we found, is that actually, if you're looking at multiple use cases, that could either be in a self-service scenario, it could be empowering employees to find answers that they in turn then can help customers, but it is improving that customer experience. And I think that's one of the strengths that knowledge management can actually bring into any organization when they're looking at digital transformation. So we're going to go now to the question part of the event, and I know we have quite a few questions that have come in for Stephen and Darren. To take your questions, if you want to submit any, just click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. It'll give you a chance to type in the question and submit it, and we will try to get to as many of these as possible. So right now, I'm going to read one that was submitted to both Stephen and Darren, and you guys can fight amongst yourselves as to who's going to answer which question. But I think that the first one here is, were there any differences in the anticipated benefits of knowledge versus the actual benefits seen post that initial implementation?
So for those, to kick off on that one, I think we wanted to look at, we were students really. We sort of to put ourselves in the shoes of looking to learn and not feel that we had any sort of expectations around that. So for me, my reading on that is that the actual benefits we saw were just really positively surprising, that we found that the system was intuitive and easy for teams to get on board with. I was passionate about it, but it was ultimately the teams who are the experts in those products who their use of it was the key for me, because the quality of their input and work with it is, when we talk about the benefit to the customer, that's what the customer will see. So the actual benefits have been, I think, really about the collaboration that we've seen. And one of the pieces that we might not have mentioned earlier is that, like many firms, we operate service over multiple sites, over multiple offices, but we want to give that consistent experience. And knowledge automation is at the heart of that, bringing teams together who may be in multiple locations around a common understanding of the best answer for that. So for me, that's probably the key part, has been the enthusiasm of the teams, the collaboration they've seen, and then that's led to what has been a really quality kind of output and knowledge system. And Darren?
Yeah, just to really quickly add to that, I think the great thing that we had as well is we had support from our executives that knew this was the right thing to do as well. So Stephen and I weren't under pressure to have a business case that had loads of additional benefits put into it initially, because we knew it was the right thing to do. What we did do, though, was absolutely baseline a lot of our key performance indicators. We then turned it on, obviously worked with it, and started seeing those move, those ones that we talked around NPS and satisfaction score. So the benefits came through, but we didn't have the hard expectation, so to speak, and almost target of benefits to deliver on it, which was quite refreshing for a project like this.
Okay. And there's another question here about the skills required to actually create knowledge. And the question is, please elaborate on the skill sets of knowledge automation writers. Are they technical writers? What types of experience are you looking for?
Yeah, this is a really good question. And it's one which we've, again, really looked to find our feet on. And where we started is finding who champions the customer experience, who's delivering great answers to customers, and that's where we started. So who's already exhibiting those, that customer first sort of approach and mindset, the understanding of how to give them the answer, how to make sure that the answer is right first time. So that's where we started, but of course there's a lot to learn, and I think if I was to sort of summarize, one is around being open to feedback. I think the key one there is as we mentioned, the knowledge automation and this type of system is around you're constantly receiving feedback, and at the end of each article, whether that be the web-facing one for customers or the internal system for all of our customer representatives, is a thumbs up, a thumbs down. Has that answered your question? And quite simple as that. And so being open to feedback is key. The ability to structure answers is absolutely key. I think that's more paramount on the internal facing system than perhaps on the external facing system, but equally important. And then just I think if there's the passion to find what is the ultimate answer for the customer, then naturally there's other skills around writing, the written word, clarity, choice of language. There are a number of things there. There's been some great work in the UK by the Government Digital Service looking at how people read. We've lent on a lot of that research around using simpler words, and that's been part of the collaboration between teams, is how do you take what it could be quite a complex answer. In finance, we have lots of perhaps historical or antiquated words. How do we turn that into something that means something to someone in 2019? And that naturally comes from that side. And I think that means that the team also embrace change, embrace of how do we continue to refine that. So I think those are the key ones to focus on. It will naturally come, but it's been finding those people with that interest in serving customers, and then naturally they become evangelists, and they've been the ones to really drive the adoption. But Darren, what are your thoughts on that?
One point to add on that. I totally agree, Steve. But I think one point to add that we definitely didn't do was choose people for that knowledge team that were subject matter experts, so to speak, because we wanted to ensure that the people who were rewriting ultimately our old knowledge into new knowledge weren't writing it from an angle that they really knew the process or the product or the service already. Our approach is often actually it's the non-subject matter experts of a particular product that actually write the knowledge, because it's our customers that are non-experts often that need our help, are the ones that are going to be consuming it for the first time. So that's definitely one thing that we did.
That's really interesting, and that actually leads on to it looks like a reoccurring theme in some of the questions that are coming through, which is when starting down the path of either crafting this knowledge or moving, as you said, from your static FAQs into a knowledge automation system. What are the most important first few steps? And one of the comments in the questions does say it actually seems very daunting. And how did you approach this step?
I think I'd agree. It's quite daunting, especially in a complex business with someone like Equiniti. But I think the approach we've talked about a few times, this sort of using more, the power of more people to source the knowledge quicker is the best way to do it. So from a customer side of things, we used our customer knowledge, and we do the same from our frontline point of view. The key is about trying to identify what is the most important pieces of knowledge you need to make sure are there first, because you need to create a space where people do want to come and interact with, and make sure there's enough knowledge on there that people can at least service their basic needs. And once they're doing that, they'll then start adding the more niche pieces of knowledge for you and feeding back the things that aren't there. So I think that's the key for me. Stephen, anything to add on that?
Absolutely. It's perhaps as the poll at the outset of the webinar is that we, like many, had knowledge systems, or we thought we did, and we had lots of information, huge reams of it, and also for a business that's been running for a number of years, we also had lots of historical information that was often of use in those questions that customers had. So part of the skill set, I think, really was around understanding what is a process and what is a piece of data and an answer. And there was a case of being really strict about refining that for the customer. And in fact, it almost is a competitive thing of how do we say it in the fewest words. But it can be, especially for perhaps businesses that have run for a number of years, a big task. But again, I think that's where having a number of people internally to really almost bounce ideas off of also, and what practice we use of pair writing is a way that we can make that simpler. The other one I would say is to actually start drawing it out, so understand what is the flow and the process. And many times we found that that might not have been readily available in the document, but if we can ask people, the team can quickly understand what the process would be today. And once it's there in the knowledge automation system, that is the go-to place for that answer.
Okay. And another question about the content itself is, do you have a preferred form of structured content in which knowledge assets are created? So I guess, typically things are formed as question-answer. Sometimes that's stylistic. I've seen in many cases that's just because it's easy to consume. That said, I've also seen knowledge repositories that have all manner of assets in them in all different structures. So how have you approached this? What's worked out best in terms of your approach to knowledge automation?
It's a really interesting point. We've perhaps taken two different approaches. One on our web-facing content, that was perhaps around the question-answer format. In that case, words, and then with the help of the Verint team, was also making sure that the styling of the website and also the tool itself could allow us to put in tables or bullet points and some formatting to add clarity to that. But typically those started off as a question-answer format. As the understanding and the team capability grows, and also from the analytics, understanding the intent or the real question behind the answer that sits behind the question the customer's answering, we've then moved on to decision trees. Ultimately, that's where there's a lot of power, and particularly in the internal system, being able to guide people through to the right answer is a really fantastic way to take people through that journey. Particularly that speed to knowledge and also speed to competency is that is a very quick way of routing people through, and it's very conversational, particularly important if we're looking to take a customer through that answer on the phone, for example. So I think we've deployed both, and I would say the internal system is now much more advanced in terms of those knowledge trees, decision trees, and that format. And I think that will only grow, and also it's a natural bit of understanding that as we see further questions come in, there's an ability to structure it and understand whether a question is one answer or whether it should be broken down into two parts. And that comes really shaped around your business and deciding what would be best for the customers in that point.
But I think it's also worth pointing out as well that it's the partnership element, isn't it, Stephen, with Verint around it's not a sort of set this up and leave us and take our money. This is very much a partnership around, once we had content written, they spent time with our knowledge team looking at how our knowledge was written, giving us recommendations, giving us the insight about what some of their other clients are doing and what best practice looks like. And for me, I think that's invaluable really for that continuous improvement piece of knowledge.
Absolutely, superb point. And I think it links back to what skills does the team need? Well, working with the team at Verint, there's just a natural passion for that. So many case studies, so many examples of how people have implemented it and solved some of these questions through their system and through an approach that you can't help but be inspired and feel that you can try and see and learn and be able to actually share that. So that's certainly helped us get up to speed quicker than we would have otherwise. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really good to hear. Now, Stephen, you've mentioned quite a few times now sort of the metrics that you have available through Verint's knowledge management solution. So have the metrics that you follow and how knowledge is consumed provided any useful customer or employee insights? And where and how are those metrics most valuable to Equiniti as a business?
It's through we've seen it in different phases. I think what was really interesting to us when we launched the platform is that people are very frank on on a digital Q&A. In fact, and I think that the insights have been completely candid, and we've gleaned things that we might not have otherwise heard and seen from customers, and it's that part that I think was very useful in us being able to then make further refinements to our platform and system. So that for one stands out for me. I mentioned from the outset the search query results. Not only can we see the frequency and the timing, which we might not have been able to see so easily in our traditional systems, but also we've been able to see the kind of language as well that helps us pinpoint. And the other side is the refinement, I suppose, of our service. So now that we're being able to see the questions, but also the path to resolving that internally, we can start seeing kind of prioritizing internal processes that may be causing repeat questions. And that's the other part where automation then dovetails into our workforce systems and also our global cloud contact technology. That part for me is where we're being able to see insights about our business processes through customer questions in very quick or near to real time. And that's ultimately going to be so much better for the customer that we can see that. So those ones for me stand out. I think there's also further work now that we're maturing the solution is to bring it alongside the other stats metrics that we see. And we're just going to have such a rich suite of insights that we can now see that for our services. But it's also a great benefit to our clients because we know that they're looking for that sort of insight onto their end employees as well, so we're able to give sort of really tailor-made feedback as well. So those ones stand out for me. But Darren and his team are sort of key metrics are their sort of lifeblood. So I don't know if there's any other ones that Darren you've particularly seen.
I think no, just those adoption rates are the ones we've talked around really. I think the ones that we are tracking that we're probably not seeing quite yet is around that time to competence for our staff, and also things like attrition rates. You know, is it making people's lives easier where they want to stay with the business longer? But those are the ones that we're still tracking.
Great. Okay, so I guess following along the theme of metrics, I've had a few questions about how you actually went about building the business case for knowledge management initially. Can you tell us a bit about that?
My best friends with the CFO. I think it was initially around having what's the need, the case, what's the issue that we've got within the business, and then actually sourcing a supplier that we thought could help solve the problem. I think it's a lot of it is about staging as well and showing people what's the art of the possible. And Stephen, you were involved obviously a lot earlier stage than me in here, but actually, showing people what we could do with it and what the future could look like if we actually took the time to invest and build a knowledge management system across our various complex businesses across the globe. Stephen, anything to add?
Absolutely. It's the speed of rollout relative to maybe other types of technology that have kind of a global scope that represent your business, that connect the customer to your teams, those types of things. So that part was key. I think it was staging the investment, the fact that you can try it and see it, and I think every stakeholder, everyone who's part of assigning or approving the budget has been a customer, is a customer, and has engaged in this type of solution. Obviously, the breadth of the immediate client base that Verint has was another part. We could go and test the solution, as we say in England. The proof of the pudding is in the eating, and we were able to see that, and that makes it a very a much more straightforward investment case. I think then quite quickly was being able to show the system in use in the trial, so we were able to test it before we went live, which is always a great part if anyone's starting out fresh. And then in the internal side is that we were able to really ring fence a team and be able to see that it hadn't had any impact on those stuff. So there was a couple of check gates to say that this solution was quick to deliver, but it also didn't have any downtime or impact on the teams either using it or the customer. So those things really do obviously help in that. And I suppose the final part is that we've been able to then show the usage and adoption through those metrics, so the focus really has been on that benefit realization and then the further investment. So those are probably a couple of tips that I can share.
Right. So when you're talking about being able to monitor how employees and customers are using the system, what are the key differences that you've noticed in how customers versus employees consume and use knowledge, if any?
So for me is that realization that we've been conditioned by Google and search and other solutions that we have outsourced our knowledge to other technology, and we want to be able to have the knowledge at the point we need to use it. And I think when we talk about the digitally enabled consumer, we were implementing it here on an investment service that was traditionally a traditional broker service that a lot of people saw the value in it being sort of quite high touch, that you built relationships, but we're seeing people wanting to have self-serve knowledge, and they're quite happy with using that. Internally, the teams that deliver great customer service are ones who don't want to necessarily store the entire procedural handbook in their head. They want to be able to access that knowledge as and when they need it. So that part is where the Verint solution is be able to provide that, but for our business would be my take, and I think it's been something that's very natural to people.
Yeah, the front line have adapted to this so well because it's what they are used to. The experience centres and the front line that often have more of the younger generation in them, and they're used to this sort of technology. They expect this sort of technology, and as an employer, we are starting to see that we've got a duty to provide this sort of technology for them to help enable their jobs. Otherwise, they'll go elsewhere. So for me, that was the biggest change in our employee behaviour. And at the same time as well, Equiniti have been doing quite a big customer experience cultural reboot type program with some of the training we've been doing as well. And what this enabled us to do was free our representatives from that burden, so to speak, of having to spend time finding information, clicking on this link, clicking on that link, and just having it there when they needed it. That enabled them then to concentrate on all of these new great techniques, providing a positive, memorable experience for our customers. So that was the biggest change I saw from an employee point of view.
No, that's really interesting. Particularly, I think the trend, as you're saying, for employees to really be expecting those customer grade, shall we call it, experiences within the workplace. And I think you see that more and more across all technologies that are being introduced to the workplace. But whether it's forms of collaboration, as well as knowledge. So yeah, that's very interesting. The next question I think is for me, which is Verint's knowledge management solution only available SaaS, or could it be on-prem? And I'll say Verint has knowledge management solutions available on both cloud and on-prem models. We realize that depending on where you are within your own journey, depending on what your business requirements are, you may have requirements for one or the other, but we're happy to facilitate knowledge management through either hosting options. Let's see, here's one. Have you had any feedback from your customers around their customer experience since the launch? Any direct feedback?
Good question. Stephen?
My take on this is part of this as well is we have built a customer panel. So absolutely key for us is user testing, and it's in those sessions that we've been able to see that how customers have used it, and also their feedback on being comfortable using it. And again, it comes back to the quality of the knowledge in your system, inspiring customers to use it. So for me, it's come through those forums, and also just tracking the satisfaction. So obviously we have the metrics saying how many people found it a useful answer. That for me has been the feedback, but it's the teams I've also heard anything.
Right. No, that's really useful. Now, we're at the top of the hour. We could go on, I think, all day talking about knowledge management. It sounds like the audience could continue to send questions. But what I will say is if you want more, you can access related materials from the resource tab. And as I said at the beginning, you also receive an email that links back to this webinar, both the recording and the resources. And of course, you know where to find us, info@verint.com. So thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you so much, Darren, for joining me. And we hope everyone has enjoyed this webinar. Cheers.